My wife remembered everyone's birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones, except ours. I stopped reminding her. The calendar notification appeared on my phone at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning in September. Wedding anniversary, 11 years. I was lying in bed next to Natalie, who was already scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the blue light. I watched her for a full minute, waiting to see if she'd say anything. She didn't look up. She was typing rapidly, probably responding to messages in one of the dozen group chats she managed for various social circles. I cleared my throat. Nothing. I got up, showered, dressed, and made coffee. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, kissed me on the cheek without making eye contact, grabbed her travel mug, and said she had an early meeting with a vendor for Stephanie's baby shower. She was out the door before I could say anything. Stephanie was her co-worker's sister. They'd met twice. That was the day I started keeping track, though I didn't know it yet. I just remember standing in our kitchen, holding my coffee, staring at the door she'd just walked through, thinking this was the 4th year in a row she'd forgotten our anniversary. But forgetting would imply she'd once remembered. The truth was more complicated than that. Natalie had a gift that bordered on supernatural. She could tell you the birthday of every person she'd ever met. Not just close friends or family, but the woman who did her nails, the guy who serviced our car, her yoga instructor's teenage daughter, the barista at the coffee shop she visited twice a month. She sent personalized gifts, handwritten cards, thoughtful messages timed perfectly to arrive on the actual day. She remembered work anniversaries, sobriety milestones, the anniversary of someone's parents' death, the day someone got their dog, the exact date someone started dating their partner. She organized surprise parties, coordinated group gifts, created elaborate celebration events for people she barely knew. Her phone was full of calendar alerts for other people's important dates. She had a spreadsheet where she tracked birthdays, anniversaries, and significant life events for over 200 people. I'd seen it once when she left her laptop open. The detail was staggering. Color-coded categories, notes about gift preferences, relationship dynamics, past celebrations. It was the kind of organizational system someone would use to run a small business, except she was using it to track the emotional lives of everyone in her extended social network. But in all those hundreds of entries, spanning years of meticulous record-keeping, there was no mention of us. No entry for our wedding anniversary, no reminder for my birthday, no notation about the day we met, the day I proposed, the day we bought our house, the day our daughter was born. Those dates simply didn't exist in her comprehensive system of remembering. For years, I told myself it was because we were so close that she didn't need to write it down. That intimate relationships operated on a different frequency than social ones. That she remembered the important things about me in ways that didn't require documentation. But standing in that kitchen on our 11th anniversary, realizing she'd already forgotten before the day even started, I couldn't maintain that fiction anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming. She didn't forget to write down our dates. She just didn't think they were worth remembering. I spent that day at work trying to focus on quarterly reports while mentally cataloging the pattern I'd been ignoring for years. My birthday had fallen on a Saturday that year. Natalie spent the entire day at a park helping organize a retirement party for her book club coordinator, someone she'd known for 8 months. She'd left at 9 a.m. and returned at 7 p.m., exhausted, saying the event had gone perfectly. She'd made a photo slideshow, coordinated with the woman's adult children, arranged for a custom cake. When she got home, she ordered pizza and we watched television. She never mentioned my birthday. Not once. I'd reminded her about it 3 days before, and she'd said we'd do something nice that weekend. By Saturday morning, it had apparently evaporated from her mind entirely. My mother called at noon to wish me happy birthday, and Natalie overheard the conversation. She looked momentarily startled, then apologetic, then said we'd celebrate next weekend. We never did. The following weekend, she was planning her cousin's engagement party, a cousin she saw once every 3 years. Our daughter Mia's 4th birthday had been in July. Natalie had been incredible during the planning phase. She'd researched venues, created an elaborate princess theme, handmade decorations, coordinated with other parents, organized activities and games. The party was perfect, Instagram-worthy. Mia was delighted, and all the other parents complimented Natalie's attention to detail and creativity. But the actual day of Mia's birth, her birthday itself, Natalie couldn't tell you without looking it up. I'd watched her hesitate when filling out forms at the pediatrician's office, her pen hovering over the birth date field until she pulled out her phone to check. Our daughter was 4 years old, and Natalie had to verify the date she was born. Meanwhile, she could tell you that her hairstylist's son's birthday was March 15th, and she'd sent him a graduation gift when he turned 18, even though she'd never met him. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She had infinite capacity to remember strangers and acquaintances, but the people she lived with barely registered in her memory at all. I started documenting it that September, not in an elaborate spreadsheet like Natalie would have used for someone else, but in a simple note on my phone. Just dates and what happened. September 21st, our anniversary. She spent the day planning Stephanie's baby shower. October 9th, my birthday. She was organizing a surprise dinner for her boss's promotion. November 3rd, the anniversary of my father's death, a day she knew was difficult for me. She was helping her workout friend coordinate a fundraiser bake sale. December 7th, Mia's preschool graduation that we'd talked about for weeks. Natalie showed up 40 minutes late because she'd stopped to help an acquaintance pick out an outfit for a first date. She arrived flustered, apologetic, saying the woman had been having a crisis and really needed guidance. Mia had already received her certificate and was sitting with another parent. I'd taken photos on my phone, feeling the weight of being the only parent who'd actually shown up for our child. Natalie hugged Mia, complimented her dress, and never acknowledged that she'd missed the entire ceremony. The pattern was impossible to ignore once I started looking for it. She remembered her nephew's girlfriend's dog's birthday, but forgot to pick Mia up from preschool twice in 1 month because she'd lost track of time while helping people with their problems. Both times the school called me at work, and I had to leave meetings to get our daughter. Both times Natalie was mortified, apologetic, saying she'd gotten distracted helping someone, and time had slipped away. The first time she'd been consulting her friend about flower arrangements for a wedding. The second time she'd been on the phone with an acquaintance talking through a breakup. I'd asked her to set an alarm on her phone. She said she didn't need to, that she'd remember. She didn't. The third time it happened, I didn't get angry or lecture her. I just picked up Mia, took her for ice cream, and came home. Natalie was working on her laptop, creating a birthday video montage for someone in her running group. She looked up when we walked in, smiled, and asked if Mia had a good day. She didn't remember she'd forgotten to pick her up until I mentioned it later that night. I realized that Natalie's memory was selective in a very specific way. She remembered things that generated social capital, moments where her thoughtfulness would be witnessed and appreciated by others. A birthday party created Instagram content and grateful testimonials. A surprise celebration generated group admiration. Remembering obscure details about someone's life made her seem caring and attentive. These were public performances of thoughtfulness, and her memory was absolutely reliable for them. But the private, intimate labor of remembering your spouse's birthday or your daughter's school schedule, things that no one else would see or praise, those didn't register as important enough to retain. It wasn't that she couldn't remember. She could remember staggering amounts of detail about hundreds of people. It was that she'd unconsciously decided that some people and some moments were worth the effort of remembering, and her own family wasn't on that list. We were too close, too familiar, too guaranteed to forgive her. We didn't generate social proof of her thoughtfulness, so we didn't warrant the space in her memory. Christmas that year was revealing. Natalie had organized a neighborhood gift exchange, coordinated the school's holiday pageant, planned 3 separate friend group celebrations, and created personalized gift baskets for everyone from our mail carrier to the woman who managed the dry cleaners. The gifts for others were thoughtful, specific to their interests, wrapped beautifully with handwritten cards explaining why she'd chosen each item. My gift was an Amazon order placed on December 23rd, a generic leather wallet that arrived in manufacturer packaging, no card. She'd handed it to me on Christmas morning with a smile, saying she'd noticed my old wallet was worn out, which was true, but I'd been carrying that worn-out wallet for 2 years. She'd noticed it was deteriorating, but hadn't remembered to replace it until the last possible moment. Meanwhile, the mail carrier got a gift basket with his favorite coffee brand, which she'd apparently asked him about months earlier, and remembered. The disparity was so stark, it felt almost comical. Later that day, her mother called, and Natalie spent 20 minutes on the phone recounting all the gifts she'd given to various people, how much thought she'd put into each one, how grateful everyone had been. She mentioned the mail carrier's coffee, the dry cleaner's wine preference, the neighbor's love of specific candles. She never mentioned my wallet. The breaking point came in February, 6 months after I'd started documenting the pattern. My mother had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer in January. She was starting treatment, and the prognosis was good, but it was still terrifying and all-consuming for my family. I'd told Natalie about the diagnosis the night we got the news. She'd been appropriately sympathetic, said all the right things, asked what she could do to help. I'd given her the date of my mother's first chemotherapy appointment, asked if she could come with me to provide support. She'd said absolutely, that she'd be there. The appointment was on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd taken a half-day off work. I texted Natalie that morning, reminding her about the appointment time. She responded immediately, saying she remembered and would meet me there. My mother's oncology center was 40 minutes from our house. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited in the parking lot for Natalie. The appointment time came and went. I went inside with my mother, held her hand during the intake process, sat with her during the infusion. She asked where Natalie was. I said she'd gotten held up but would be there soon. An hour passed, then 2. The treatment took 4 hours. Natalie never showed up. I called her 3 times during those 4 hours. The first 2 went to voicemail. The third time she answered, breathless and apologetic, saying she'd lost track of time. She was at a coffee shop with her friend's sister, someone she'd met once at a barbecue 6 months ago. The woman was going through a divorce and needed someone to talk to, and Natalie had agreed to meet her for coffee that morning. The coffee meeting had turned into an hours-long therapy session, and she'd completely forgotten about my mother's chemotherapy appointment. She said the divorce situation was really intense, that the woman was falling apart, that she couldn't just leave her alone. I asked her when she'd been planning to tell me she wasn't coming. She said she'd just realized what time it was. I told her my mother had been receiving poison through an IV for the past 3 hours and had asked about her repeatedly. Natalie went quiet. Then she said she was so sorry, that she'd make it up to my mother, that she'd come to the next appointment. I ended the call without responding. My mother looked at me with that expression parents get when they're trying not to criticize your spouse. She said it was okay, that Natalie was probably just busy. I nodded and held her hand and felt something fundamental calcify inside me. That night, after Mia was asleep, I asked Natalie why she'd missed the appointment. She started to explain about the divorce situation again, about how urgent it had been, how the woman had really needed her. I interrupted and asked her if she'd written down my mother's chemotherapy appointment in her calendar. She hesitated, then admitted she hadn't. I asked her why not. She said she'd thought she'd remember. I pulled out my phone and opened her public Facebook profile. I scrolled through her recent posts. In the past month, she'd posted birthday wishes to 11 different people. She'd organized a surprise party for an acquaintance's promotion. She'd coordinated a group gift for someone's new baby. She'd sent care packages to 3 different people, going through various difficulties. Every post was time-stamped, proving she'd remembered these events on the correct dates. I showed her the phone. Then I asked her again why she hadn't written down my mother's chemotherapy appointment. She looked at the screen, her face changing as she understood what I was showing her. She said it wasn't the same thing, that those were different kinds of responsibilities. I asked her how. She struggled to articulate it, finally saying that she did those things for people who needed community support, who didn't have anyone else. I pointed out that my mother was currently fighting cancer and could probably use community support. Natalie said my mother had family to support her, as if that made it acceptable to not show up. I showed her my phone's note app, the 6 months of documentation I'd been keeping. Every missed birthday, forgotten anniversary, failed commitment to our family, while she was busy being everyone else's emotional support system. She read through it silently, and I watched her face shift from defensive to shocked to something that might have been shame. She said she hadn't realized the pattern. I asked her how she hadn't realized it. How do you remember the birthday of someone's teenage child who you've never met, but forget your own daughter's birth date without looking it up? She said she'd just had more practice with other people, that she'd built systems for them. I asked why she'd never built a system for us. She didn't have an answer. The silence stretched between us, and I realized we'd reached a point of clarity that couldn't be walked back. She'd spent years constructing an elaborate infrastructure of care and attention for hundreds of people, and somewhere in that construction, she'd decided her own family didn't require the same effort. We were supposed to just be there, always available, never needing the kind of active remembering she gave to everyone else. I told her I was done reminding her, that from now on, if she wanted to remember something about us, about me, about Mia, about our life together, she'd have to do it herself. No more hints about upcoming birthdays or anniversaries, no more text message reminders about school pickups or doctor's appointments or family commitments. If she remembered, she remembered. If she didn't, that would be information too. She asked what I meant by that. I said, I meant exactly what I'd said. I was tired of managing her memory of our own family, while watching her effortlessly remember every detail about strangers and acquaintances. I was tired of being the backup system that kept our life running while she outsourced all her emotional bandwidth to other people. From now on, she was responsible for remembering on her own, and whatever happened as a result would tell us both what she actually prioritized. She started to protest, saying I was being unfair, that this felt like a test. I said marriage wasn't supposed to require testing your spouse to see if they remembered you existed. She went quiet. I went to bed. She stayed downstairs for a long time, and when she finally came up, she didn't try to talk about it. The first test came 2 weeks later. Mia had a parent-teacher conference scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at 3:30. I'd told Natalie about it a month earlier when the notice came home from school. We'd both signed the acknowledgement form saying we'd attend. Thursday morning, I said nothing. I took off work early and showed up at the school at 3:20. Natalie wasn't there. 3:30 came. The conference started. Mia's teacher went through her progress, showed us artwork, discussed social development. I took notes, asked questions, thanked her for the time. Natalie never showed. I picked Mia up from the after-school program at 5:15 and drove home. Natalie was in the kitchen starting dinner prep. She asked how my day was. I said it was fine. She asked if anything interesting happened. I said I'd gone to Mia's parent-teacher conference. She dropped the knife she'd been holding. It clattered on the cutting board. She said she'd completely forgotten. I said I know. She asked why I hadn't reminded her. I reminded her of our conversation 2 weeks earlier. She said she'd thought I was just upset, that I didn't really mean it. I told her I'd meant every word. She was close to tears, saying this wasn't fair, that she was trying her best. I asked her if her best included remembering everything about everyone except her own family. The pattern revealed itself quickly once I stopped compensating for it. My birthday came in March. I didn't mention it in the days leading up to it. Saturday morning arrived, the day itself, and Natalie woke up energized and cheerful, saying she was meeting her friend group for brunch to plan someone's bachelorette party. She was gone by 9 a.m. She returned at 3 p.m. full of stories about the brunch spot and the party plans and how beautifully everything was coming together. She never said happy birthday. I'd spent the day taking Mia to the Science Museum, just the two of us, my phone full of birthday messages from friends and family. My brother had sent a long text. My mother had called. Colleagues had sent emails. Natalie's own mother had texted me birthday wishes, but Natalie herself never acknowledged it. Not that day, not the next day, not ever. She moved through the weekend completely unaware, and I watched it happen with a strange, detached fascination. The date had presumably appeared in her phone at some point, the automatic calendar notification that everyone gets from social media. She'd either ignored it or it hadn't registered as significant enough to retain. Meanwhile, on her social media, she posted a lengthy birthday message to someone from her gym, complete with photos and heartfelt words about their friendship. I realized the performance of it, the public-facing nature of her memory. She posted about other people's birthdays because it created visible proof of her thoughtfulness. She organized events because they generated social media content and group appreciation. She remembered details about acquaintances because dropping those details into conversation made her seem attentive and caring. But there was no audience for remembering your husband's birthday. No public validation for showing up to your child's parent-teacher conference. No social proof generated by being present for your mother-in-law's chemotherapy. Those were private labors of love that only the recipients would know about, and apparently that wasn't enough motivation for her. The realization was clarifying and devastating simultaneously. My wife's caring was performative, calibrated for external validation. and I'd spent years interpreting it as genuine warmth that just somehow never extended to me. The truth was simpler. She didn't remember me because remembering me didn't benefit her social image. April brought our daughter's 5th birthday. I'd planned a small party weeks in advance, invited family, ordered a cake, bought presents. I mentioned none of this to Natalie. As the date approached, she didn't ask about plans or suggest we do something. The day arrived on a Saturday. I woke Mia up, made her favorite breakfast, told her we'd have a celebration that afternoon with grandparents and her cousins. Natalie slept late, then announced she'd committed to helping set up for a charity run that morning and would be back by early afternoon. She was gone by 10 a.m. The party was at 2 p.m. My parents arrived at 1:30 to help set up. Natalie's parents arrived at 1:45, asking where their daughter was. I said she was at a charity event. They looked confused, mentioning they'd assumed she'd be here for Mia's party. I shrugged and said she must have had other commitments. We had the party without her. Mia blew out candles on her cake, opened presents, played with her cousins. She asked where Mommy was twice. I said Mommy was helping people and would be home soon. Natalie arrived at 4:30 after everyone had left and I'd cleaned up. She walked in looking tired but satisfied, talking about how successful the charity run had been, how well organized everything was, how much money they'd raised. Then she noticed the wrapped presents, the remains of the cake, the decorations. She asked if we'd had the party already. I confirmed we had. She looked stricken, said she didn't realize it was today. I said nothing. She went to find Mia, apologized profusely, said she'd make it up to her. Mia accepted the apology the way children do, immediately and completely. I watched the interaction and felt nothing. The detachment was the strangest part. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required emotional investment, the belief that things could be different if only she understood how much damage she was doing. But I'd stopped believing that. She understood. The evidence was impossible to ignore. She just didn't care enough to change it. Or more precisely, the social cost of changing it, the loss of her reputation as everyone's thoughtful friend, and the public validation that came with it, was higher than the private cost of neglecting her family. She'd made a calculation, probably unconsciously, that we'd always be there, we'd always forgive her, we'd always understand. Other people were volatile, temporary, requiring constant maintenance and care to keep them in her orbit. But family was permanent, guaranteed, requiring no effort to retain. She'd optimized for the relationships that required work and let the guaranteed ones atrophy through neglect. The logic was sound if you viewed relationships as resources to be managed efficiently rather than as emotional commitments requiring consistent presence. She was treating us like a savings account that never needed deposits because the principal was secure, while she invested all her energy into high-risk social bonds that needed constant attention. May brought Mother's Day. I wondered if she'd remember her own celebration day, if the social media saturation of Mother's Day content would trigger some recognition. It didn't. The day passed with her organizing a surprise Mother's Day brunch for her friends group, coordinating gifts for the mothers in her social circle, posting tributes to her own mother. She came home that evening exhausted from the coordination efforts, flopped onto the couch, and said it had been a beautiful day celebrating mothers. Mia and I had spent the day at the zoo, just the two of us again. We'd looked at animals and eaten overpriced concession food, and I'd listened to my 5-year-old talk about how Mommy was always busy helping people. She said it without resentment, just as an observation, the way she might comment on the weather. I'd responded that yes, Mommy helped a lot of people. Mia had asked if we could help people too. I'd said we were helping each other, which seemed to satisfy her. That night, after Mia was asleep, Natalie scrolled through her phone showing me photos from the brunch she'd organized, the decorations, the happy mothers, the success of the event. She never once acknowledged that she was also a mother, that today had been her day too, that her own daughter and husband existed. June was our 12th anniversary. The day approached and I watched Natalie's calendar fill with other people's events. A wedding shower, a retirement party, 2 birthdays, a graduation celebration. Our anniversary landed on a Saturday. That morning she told me she'd committed to helping her colleague's daughter move into a new apartment. College girl, lots of furniture, needed multiple trips. She'd be gone most of the day. I said that was fine. She left at 8 a.m. I took Mia to my brother's house for a play date with her cousins, then spent the afternoon cleaning the garage, a task I'd been putting off for months. Natalie returned at 7 p.m., sweaty and exhausted, talking about how many boxes they'd moved, how grateful the girl was, how nice the new apartment looked. She ordered takeout for dinner. We ate while she scrolled through her phone responding to messages. When we went to bed, she never mentioned what day it was. 12 years of marriage, and the anniversary didn't register as significant enough to remember. But the next day, she woke up early to bake a cake for someone's work anniversary at her office. 3 years of employment apparently warranted more recognition than 12 years of marriage. The comparison would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. I started wondering what would happen if something genuinely important occurred, something with actual consequences beyond hurt feelings. The thought experiment became real in July. My mother's cancer treatment had been successful, but she needed follow-up surgery to remove the original tumor site. It was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, and I'd told Natalie about it 3 weeks in advance. I'd shown her the date on my calendar. She'd said she'd be there. As the date approached, I mentioned it exactly once more, 2 weeks before the surgery, just to see if it had registered. She'd said yes, she remembered. She'd put it in her calendar. I didn't follow up again. Tuesday morning arrived. I kissed Mia goodbye at preschool, drove to the hospital, texted my siblings that I was there. I did not text Natalie. My mother was in pre-op, nervous but trying to stay positive. The surgery was expected to take 2 to 3 hours. My father was there, my brother, my sister. We sat in the surgical waiting room, making awkward small talk and drinking terrible coffee. My sister asked where Natalie was. I said she had other commitments. My sister's expression suggested she understood more than she was saying. 3 hours passed. The surgeon came out and said everything had gone well, that my mother was in recovery. We were able to see her in small groups. Natalie never showed up. Not during the surgery, not during recovery, not that evening when my mother was moved to a regular room. I stayed until 8 p.m., then drove home. Natalie was in the living room working on her laptop. I asked what she'd been doing all day. She said she'd helped her friend photograph a birthday party for the friend's daughter, then edited the photos and created a digital album. She looked proud of herself. I asked if she'd forgotten something important today. She looked confused, said she didn't think so. I told her my mother had cancer surgery. The color drained from her face. She said she'd completely forgotten, that she'd marked it in her calendar but never checked. I asked her to show me her calendar. She pulled out her phone, opened the app, scrolled to today's date. There was no entry for my mother's surgery. Whatever she'd claimed to have written down had never actually been entered. The calendar was full of other things, though. 3 different birthday reminders, a note about someone's work presentation she'd promised to attend virtually, a reminder to send a care package to an acquaintance going through a hard time, but nothing about her mother-in-law's surgery. The consequences I'd been theoretically wondering about crystallized in that moment. My mother had noticed Natalie's absence, had asked about it, had processed the information that her daughter-in-law couldn't be bothered to show up for her cancer surgery. That hurt couldn't be undone with an apology or explanation. My siblings had noticed. My father had noticed. They'd all been too polite to comment on it directly, but the absence had been noted and catalogued. Natalie's priorities had been publicly revealed to my entire family in the starkest possible way. She could spend 6 hours photographing and editing pictures for someone else's kid's birthday party, but she couldn't spare 3 hours to support her husband's mother through cancer surgery. The performance of caring had been exposed as exactly that, a performance calibrated for people who would appreciate it publicly, but non-existent for people who expected it privately. I told Natalie she should call my mother and apologize. She said she would, that she'd explain what happened. I said there was nothing to explain. She'd forgotten because she'd decided it wasn't important enough to remember. That was the entire explanation. She started crying, saying it wasn't like that she just got confused. I asked her how she'd gotten confused when her calendar had multiple reminders for other people's events on the same day, but nothing for her mother-in-law's surgery. She couldn't answer that. I went upstairs to check on Mia, leaving Natalie alone with her phone and her spreadsheet full of other people's important dates. The next day, Natalie did call my mother. I heard her side of the conversation from the hallway, the elaborate apologies, the explanations about being overwhelmed and losing track of dates, the promises to do better. I heard my mother's response, gracious and forgiving, saying it was fine, that everyone gets busy. But the warmth that had always been there between them was gone from my mother's tone. She sounded polite, distant, the way you'd speak to a casual acquaintance rather than family. The damage was done. That evening, Natalie tried to talk to me about it, saying she understood she'd messed up badly, that she was going to make changes, that this had been a wake-up call. I'd heard versions of this speech before, after previous incidents. The promises to do better always faded within weeks. This time I didn't engage with it. I just asked her a direct question. Why was she capable of maintaining detailed records of hundreds of people's lives but couldn't remember to show up for her own family? She struggled to answer, finally saying something about how keeping track of other people gave her a sense of purpose, made her feel needed and valued. I asked if she felt needed and valued by me and Mia. She said of course she did. I asked her why she never remembered anything about us then. She said she didn't need to maintain those systems for us because we were always there. I told her that was exactly the problem. She'd taken our presence for granted so completely that she'd stopped putting any effort into maintaining it. We were guaranteed, so we didn't warrant the care she gave to everyone else. August brought a new development. Natalie's company had restructured, and she'd been offered a promotion that required relocation to the corporate office 3 hours away. It was significant career advancement, better pay, leadership position. She'd need to start in October. She told me about it excitedly, saying this was exactly the opportunity she'd been working toward, that the timing was perfect. I asked what her plan was for the move. She said we'd need to look at houses in the new city, that Mia would need to transfer preschools, that it would be an adjustment, but they'd make it work. She was using plural pronouns, assuming we'd all relocate together. I asked her if she'd actually considered whether I wanted to move. She looked surprised, said she'd assumed I'd be supportive of her career. I said I was supportive of her career. I just wasn't sure I was interested in uprooting our lives for it. She asked what I meant. I said exactly what I'd said. The promotion was her opportunity, her achievement, her choice. But whether our family relocated for it was a separate decision that required actual discussion rather than assumption. She said couples make these decisions together, that this was good for our family's financial future. I pointed out that couples also remember each other's birthdays and show up for each other's mother's surgery, that the foundation of making major life decisions together requires actually being invested in each other on a daily basis. She went quiet. Over the next week, we had multiple conversations about the promotion. Natalie kept framing it as an opportunity for us, for our family, for our future. But underneath that framing was the implicit assumption that I'd obviously support whatever she wanted, because that's what I'd always done. I'd been the accommodating spouse who took care of logistics and remembered important dates, and picked up the slack when she was busy helping everyone else. She'd come to expect that I'd continue in that role indefinitely, that my support was as guaranteed as oxygen. The idea that I might have my own perspective on whether to relocate, my own priorities about Mia's stability, my own feelings about following her career at the expense of my own, these hadn't occurred to her. I told her I needed time to think about it. She looked worried for the first time since getting the offer, like maybe her automatic yes would need to be more complicated. I told her I'd give her my answer by the end of the month. She asked what factors I was considering. I said I was considering whether I wanted to be married to someone who could remember every detail about strangers, but forgot her own family existed. She asked if I was seriously suggesting this could end our marriage. I said I was seriously suggesting that 12 years of being treated as optional had consequences. I spent the next 2 weeks talking to people I trusted. My brother asked what I wanted, separate from what Natalie wanted, or what seemed fair or logical. I realized I didn't know. I'd spent so many years being the supportive spouse, the reliable parent, the one who held everything together while she was off being everyone else's hero, that I'd lost track of what I actually wanted for my own life. My mother asked gently if I was happy. I said I didn't think happiness was the right question anymore. I felt more like a co-parent and roommate than a husband. We lived parallel lives in the same house, coordinated logistics about Mia, split bills and responsibilities, but there was no intimacy, no real partnership, no sense that we were building something together. She was building her reputation as the thoughtful friend everyone could count on, and I was building a life that functioned without expecting anything from her. My mother pointed out that I'd stopped expecting things from my wife, because expecting things had consistently led to disappointment. I'd learned helplessness in my own marriage, and now I was functioning from a place of such low expectations that her offer to relocate for her career felt presumptuous. She was asking me to uproot my life for her success while contributing nothing to the daily work of our actual partnership. I thought about Mia, about what kind of relationship she was learning to accept as normal by watching her parents. She was learning that mothers were busy people who helped everyone else and sometimes forgot their own children. She was learning that fathers were reliable, present, the ones you counted on when you needed something. She was learning that love looked like one person doing all the remembering, while the other person collected social accolades for being thoughtful to strangers. These lessons were already being internalized, shaping her understanding of relationships and value. I thought about what would happen if we moved for Natalie's promotion. I'd leave my job, leave our community, leave my family's support system. Mia would leave her preschool and friends. We'd be starting over in a new city, where Natalie would be even busier with her new leadership position, even more pulled into building professional relationships and reputation. I'd be more isolated, more responsible for all the daily logistics, more alone in the practical work of maintaining our family. The pattern would intensify, not improve. The move would require trust that Natalie would show up differently in a new environment, and I had no evidence to support that trust. She'd shown me repeatedly who she was. I needed to believe her. At the end of August, I told Natalie I wasn't moving. She could take the promotion if she wanted to. She could commute if she chose to. She could decline the opportunity. But Mia and I were staying here, near my family, in the community where I had support systems and stability. Natalie was furious. She said I was being selfish, that this was her career, that couples supported each other through opportunities like this. I asked her to show me evidence that she'd supported me through anything in the past 12 years. She started listing things, household tasks she'd done, times she'd been present. All of them were baseline cohabitation things, the bare minimum of sharing a space. I asked her to name one time she'd prioritized my needs over someone else's crisis. She couldn't. I asked her to name one of our anniversaries without looking it up. She pulled out her phone. I told her not to bother. The point was made. She started crying, saying I was punishing her for trying to be a good person, for caring about people, for being generous with her time. I said there was nothing generous about giving everything to everyone else while your own family got whatever was left over, which was usually nothing. That wasn't generosity. That was distribution of care that deliberately excluded the people who should matter most. She asked what I wanted from her. I said I wanted a partner who actually showed up, who remembered I existed, who put even a fraction of the effort into our relationship that she put into maintaining friendships with people she barely knew. She said she could do that. I said I didn't believe her anymore. September passed in tense silence. Natalie took the promotion with the agreement that she'd commute until the company found a solution. 3 hours each way, several days a week. She'd stay in corporate housing when needed, come home on weekends. The arrangement meant she was even less present than before, which was almost impressive given how absent she'd been while living in the same house. Mia adjusted to seeing her mother even less frequently. I adjusted to functioning as a single parent in everything but legal status. The weekends Natalie was home, she spent catching up on social commitments, attending events, coordinating celebrations. She was still managing her elaborate system of caring for hundreds of people. She just added 3 hours of commute time to her schedule and reduced the time she spent with her family accordingly. The priorities remained unchanged. I filed for separation in October. Not divorce immediately, just legal separation. Space to figure out if there was anything left worth rebuilding. Natalie was blindsided despite all the conversations we'd had. She asked if I was serious, if I really meant to end our marriage over forgetting some birthdays and missing some appointments. The minimization was stunning. I'd presented her with years of documented evidence that she'd consistently prioritized everyone else over her family, and she'd reduced it to forgetting some dates. I told her this wasn't about memory. It was about priorities and choices and who she'd decided was worth showing up for. We'd never been on that list. The separation was civil in the way endings are when both parties are too tired to fight. We divided time with Mia, split finances, established boundaries. Natalie kept the house initially, since I'd moved to an apartment nearby to make Mia's transition easier. The first few months were strange, grief mixed with relief. I grieved the marriage I'd thought I had, the partnership I'd believed in before I started seeing the evidence clearly. I felt relief at no longer having to manage the gap between who Natalie presented herself as publicly and who she actually was privately. Relief at not waiting for her to remember me, not being disappointed when she inevitably didn't. My brother asked if I'd given up too easily, if marriage counseling might have helped. I pointed out that counseling required both people to believe there was a problem. Natalie still thought she'd been a good partner who'd made some oversights. She didn't see the pattern because acknowledging the pattern would require admitting she'd systematically neglected her family for years in favor of building a reputation as everyone's savior. That admission would cost her the social identity she'd built her entire personality around. Mia adjusted better than I'd feared. She was young enough that having two homes became normal quickly. Natalie tried to implement changes, started setting alarms for custody exchanges, wrote down Mia's schedule, made efforts to remember school events. But the efforts were effortful, requiring conscious work, and I could see the strain of it. She was forcing herself to remember because there were now legal consequences for forgetting, custody arrangements that would be impacted if she failed to show up. The motivation was compliance, not care. Meanwhile, she was still posting birthday tributes to acquaintances, still organizing celebrations for her social circles, still maintaining that elaborate system of public thoughtfulness. The contrast remained. She could remember hundreds of people's details voluntarily, but needed court-ordered schedules and alarm reminders to remember her own daughter. My lawyer asked if I wanted to pursue sole custody, given her pattern of forgetting. I said no. Whatever else Natalie was, she loved Mia. She just loved her public image more. That wasn't grounds for removing a parent, just grounds for protecting Mia from the worst effects of it. By December, 6 months into the separation, I'd started building a life that felt more solid than anything I'd had during the marriage. I had sole responsibility for myself and Mia during my custody time, which meant I could count on my own presence rather than being constantly disappointed by someone else's absence. I'd started dating someone casually, a woman I'd met through a friend who remembered my coffee order by the third date and texted me on Thursday to confirm Friday plans. The contrast was stark. This was what basic consideration looked like, remembering small details not because they'd been entered into a system or set as alarms, but because the person was paying attention. I'd forgotten that relationships could work that way, that presence could be voluntary rather than extracted through reminders. Mia had a school concert in mid-December. Both Natalie and I were there, sitting on opposite sides of the auditorium. Mia sang her song, found both of us in the crowd, waved. After the concert, we met in the lobby. Natalie suggested getting ice cream together. The three of us, like we used to. I agreed. Sitting in the ice cream shop, watching Mia talk about her performance, I felt the ghost of what our family might have been if Natalie had ever actually been present for it. On the way out, Natalie asked if we could talk privately. We stepped aside while Mia looked at the toy machine. Natalie said she'd been in therapy since the separation, that she was starting to understand some things about herself. She'd built her entire self-worth around being needed by others because her own family of origin had treated her as valuable only when she was useful. She'd carried that survival mechanism into adulthood, constantly proving her worth through acts of service for others. The people who'd already proven they loved her unconditionally, like me and Mia, didn't require that proof, so she'd unconsciously decided they didn't need her attention. She was working on it. She wanted me to know that. I told her I appreciated her doing that work, that it would be good for Mia regardless of what happened with us. She asked if there was any chance we could rebuild. I asked her if she remembered what today's date was. She looked confused by the question. I said today was December 15th. 1 year ago today, she'd forgotten my birthday. She pulled out her phone to check, saw that I was right. She said she should have remembered, that she'd been focused on this conversation and nervous about seeing me. I said that was exactly it. She'd remember when the memory served her immediate needs, when forgetting would have obvious negative consequences. But organic memory, the kind that comes from actually caring about someone's life, that still wasn't there. She asked if I expected her to remember every date. I said I expected her to remember some dates. That being married to someone meant their significant moments registered in your mind without requiring alarm systems and court orders. She looked hurt. I felt tired. This same conversation, different versions, for over a year. Nothing had fundamentally changed except the addition of therapy vocabulary to explain why she'd always chosen everyone else over us. Christmas that year was split custody. Mia spent Christmas Eve with Natalie, Christmas Day with me. On Christmas morning, Mia showed me the gifts her mother had given her. Thoughtful things, specific to Mia's interests. Natalie had clearly put effort into the selection. She could do it when the occasion was marked clearly enough, when the date was culturally significant enough that forgetting would be obvious. The question was whether she'd ever be able to do it for the ordinary days, the regular moments that made up actual life. My gift to Mia was a journal with prompts for recording memories. I told her she could write about things that mattered to her, things she wanted to remember. She asked if I'd help her remember to write in it. I said I would, but also said remembering was a skill she could learn herself, that some people were good at it naturally, and others had to work harder at it. That both ways were okay as long as the effort was made. She asked if Mommy was good at remembering. I said Mommy was very good at remembering some things, and still learning to remember others. It was the most honest answer I could give a 6-year-old. January brought a court date to finalize the terms of the separation. Natalie asked one more time if I'd consider reconciliation. I asked if she'd kept a calendar of Mia's schedule this past month. She said yes. I asked if she'd needed to look at it, or if she'd remembered naturally. She admitted she'd needed to check it regularly. I asked if she'd remembered the birthday of anyone else during the same month. She looked uncomfortable. I asked her to show me her social media. She reluctantly pulled out her phone. 3 birthday posts in January alone. People I'd never heard of, with personalized messages about their friendship and specific memories. The evidence remained unchanged. She could still effortlessly remember strangers while needing documented systems to remember her own child. I told the lawyer to proceed with making the separation permanent. Natalie signed the papers, looking defeated. We were divorced by February, 12 years of marriage reduced to asset division and custody schedules. At the final hearing, the judge asked if we'd attempted counseling. I said we'd identified the fundamental issue, but couldn't resolve it. The judge asked what the issue was. I said one party had consistently prioritized hundreds of other relationships over the marriage, and saw nothing problematic about that hierarchy. The judge looked between us, stamped the papers, and declared the marriage dissolved. The first year after the divorce, Natalie continued her pattern. She'd show up for scheduled custody time because it was court-ordered. She'd remember Mia's major events if I sent reminder texts, but the organic attention never developed. She was still posting about other people's children's achievements, still organizing celebrations for acquaintances, still maintaining that extensive network of public thoughtfulness. Her social media presented her as warm, attentive, the friend everyone wanted. Only Mia and I knew the private truth. The person who showed up for everyone else couldn't show up for us without legal requirements and calendar alerts. Mia started asking questions around age 7. Why didn't Mommy remember her school play without Daddy reminding her? Why did Mommy know so much about other kids' activities but forgot about hers? I answered honestly, but gently. Some people show care through remembering, and some people show care through other ways. Mommy showed care by being present when she was scheduled to be present. That counted for something, even if it wasn't the same as organic memory. Mia seemed to accept this, but I watched her stop expecting spontaneous attention from her mother. She'd learned the same lesson I had. Natalie's care was conditional on external structure. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.